Welcome to the Get to Know Memphis First United Methodist podcast. I am your host, Thomas First, and I will be interviewing people from our congregation so that through great stories, laughter, and tales of the experience of the God who is an active agent in our world, we can get to know one another. Welcome to the Get to Know Memphis First podcast. I am Tom First. I'm the pastor and the host of this little podcast, this little in-house podcast. So grateful today for my friend Betsy Miller joining me. Betsy, how long have we known each other now?
Oh boy, we
First
moved to
podcast question right out of the gate. How long have we known each other?
I think about 2.5 years.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say I knew it was at least 2 years, and I met your husband Jeff, I think around 2022 at an academic conference. So,
Yeah.
well, I am grateful that you're my guest on this podcast today. I'm excited to talk to you. You have been one of my favorite conversation partners the last 2.5 years. So Betsy, the goal of this podcast is really to help people get to know each other and to give each other some connection points and some stories that we can talk to each other about. So one of the questions I like to start off with is, do you have a person in your memory? It can be an adult memory, but depending on your religious background, you can go all the way back to your earliest childhood memories. Do you have somebody in mind who created some of your first memories or images of God?
I always envisioned God as a fat white man, balding, glasses, in a suit, with his hands held crossed over his hands folded across his belly, looking down at us
Mm.
from the sky and smiling.
Yeah.
And I think that I got that from the first pastor I remember, who he did not look like that exactly. He looked kind of like that, but that was kind of he kind of gave off that sort of energy, I guess.
I thought you were going to go somewhere totally different with that. I thought you were going to say like God's arms are crossed in anger, looking down on us in judgment, but you almost had like a more like grandfatherly kind of image.
Yeah, kind of like amused is how I envisioned him, but also not intimate, you
Ah,
know?
okay. So still like a distance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Did your pastor like give that to you just like in a one-on-one conversation, or was that like in a sermon that you heard, or?
No, I think that if I told him this, he would be like totally confused.
One of the things that I have learned from being a pastor is that I can't really control what people hear. Who knows what image of God he was trying to convey to you, but once it comes out of his mouth, like it's pretty impossible for him to control what you as a child heard and the images that you came up with.
And he might have said nothing, that it might have just been my imagination.
Yeah.
So,
I've had people come up to me after sermons and will say, "Gosh, that was such a great sermon," blah, blah, blah. And then they repeat back to me what they heard in the sermon. And I think to myself, that is the exact opposite of what I just said. And
oh,
so that's so funny.
no.
And, I mean, and as children too, like, you never know what children hear. So you would say then your pastor, that image, your earliest memory of who God is, that image comes from your pastor.
I think so. And like I said, I have no idea if he intended that in any way.
Yeah. Did you ever, as a child, or I mean, I guess I'm asking about childhood, but it could be later than that. Did you ever have like an experience of God that sort of shaped you?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So when I was junior in high school, going into my senior year, I was dating a guy who was agnostic. And, I grew up in church. It was it was an experience. Church was like an aspect of my life. It wasn't a relationship with God was not what my life was centered on, or even something I thought of myself as having. I wouldn't have said I had a relationship with God. But when I was 16, I was dating this guy. He told me that about why he didn't know if God was real. And I had never really heard anybody talk like that, and told me one night why he didn't necessarily believe in God, and everything he said made sense. And it was really upsetting. So that night I prayed, God, if you're real, will you show me? And that summer I was working at a fast food place called Taco John's, and the owner of the franchise, his stepson was hired, and he was this like wild hippie guy. This was in the late 90s. He had been a drug dealer and just into that sort of lifestyle, I guess, but he had recently had a experience of coming to have a personal relationship with Jesus. He was a Pentecostal kid, and so he was always talking about Jesus with us. He was weird, and he had some sort of peace and purpose in life that I really
Ah.
admired. He was cute. I think he was 21 or
Easy
so.
to be peaceful when you're cute.
Exactly. So he invited a bunch of his coworkers over to his house one night, and his stepdad talked about how you can have a personal relationship with Christ and ask him into your heart. And he asked if anybody wanted to do that. And so I said, yeah, sure. Okay. That night I got baptized in their bathtub. And I
Oh,
remember,
no
I
way.
know. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was quite the hippie, and I was very
Wow.
much into the '90s Christian culture revival. And then after that, the reason we went over to his house was to watch a movie, and we watched the movie A Thief in the Night, which is this
Oh my gosh.
horrible
Yeah.
70s movie, I think 70s, about the rapture, and it was
Yeah. I've seen
terrifying.
it. I've seen it. Yeah. They have bell
Um,
bottoms on and it's terrible acting, but it gets its point across.
It really did. And so I'd never heard of the rapture or any sort of end times stuff. All of this was news to me. So it was very disturbing. Then I went home and I told my mom I'd become a Christian. And she's like, what are you talking about? We've been going to church this whole time. Are you joining a cult? Which at the time I was a teenager and this was like my big rebellion. So I was like, understand. And now as a parent, I totally understand where she was coming from.
Uh-huh. Listen, I am so glad that you want to be more involved in church. Also, that's creepy. Oh, you got baptized in a dude's, I can imagine as a parent, I'd be like, you got baptized in somebody's bathtub? What is
Yeah.
happening here?
Yeah.
But as a
Yeah.
teenager, I would have thought that was amazing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I was not a rebellious kid, and becoming a Christian, like a evangelical Christian, was my rebellion. It
Yeah.
was awesome.
What kind of church did you grow up going to?
I grew up going to a Methodist church.
Okay. Yeah.
Really weird that I'm back here. I never would have expected.
Well, it's such an interesting Methodism is such an interesting thing because it's technically mainline Protestant, but there's still elements like really strong elements of revivalism and evangelicalism in it. So it's such a weird denomination to be a part of.
Mhm.
In all this time, like growing in your faith all of these years, like is there a person that you think of that would be like a role model in your faith that you really look up to?
Yeah, when I was in college, I was involved with the Baptist Student Ministry, and one of the women on staff was named Melody Richardson. She just mentored me. We met every week. She was a lot. She was like my therapist, but also we would read the Bible and talk about things. I think that it was probably hard for her because I always came with the drama of the week. And we'd spend a lot of time talking about that. And then she'd be like, okay, well, let's look at this passage too. I'd be like, right, yeah, okay, cool. But she really held me up during college. I struggled with severe depression and I didn't realize it at the time. I
Hmm.
just knew this guy had broken my heart and I was upset for 2 years about it. It wasn't that he was that great. I had depression
Yeah, yeah.
and he was okay. And she really helped me get through that. She's someone I very much admire. I was terrified that I would never get married when I was in college. And
Hmm.
Melody was, I think, in her 40s and single, had never been married. And it just gave me a lot of hope that God could be enough
Uh,
for me if that's the way life happened. And she
yeah.
still isn't married. She's got to be in her 60s now, I would imagine.
Wow.
She's not married. She'd like to be married, but she's content and she's an amazing person.
Hmm.
Um,
I think
so
it's a disservice that the church does to young people to not allow singleness to be a viable godly option. Like we
mhm,
talk to young people about saving themselves so they're married or whatever about marriage, and it's like, yeah, there are other options besides that.
mhm,
And that's incredible that your mentor, your spiritual hero is a single woman. In
yeah.
the olden days, she would have been like the most spiritual person in the church.
Right.
in the like
I think she
medieval.
probably was. She just, people didn't realize it.
Yeah, yeah. I find that that's the case too. Like a lot of times, the most spiritual people in the church are like the people you wouldn't even think. So I know a little bit about you just from our own personal conversations. I know you do some stand-up comedy and stuff like that. So this next question, it doesn't have to be spiritual. It can be a spiritual question. You can answer it spiritually, but it doesn't have to be. Is there a story from your life that you sort of like? If people want to know who Betsy Miller is, like this is the story you tell them.
Mm. Okay, I'm going to give two stories. One is
All right.
sad and one is funny.
Okay.
Okay. So this first one is like an identity shaping sort of story. I was in kindergarten and my mom had given me a necklace for my birthday. It had was plastic and had a whole bunch of different plastic charms on it. Like maybe a unicorn or a telephone, or I remember one of them was an axe. I don't know why that was fun, but
Uh,
that was it. And so I wore this to school, and a girl came up to me and said, "Hey, can I wear one of your charms?" And I said, "I don't know about that. I don't know if I want to get them lost." And she said, "Well, if you don't let me borrow one of your charms, I won't be your friend." And this was I just turned 5, and I definitely wanted her to be my friend. So I let her borrow my charm. And then word spread. And so girl after girl kept coming up to me and saying, can I have one of your charms? No, if you don't, I won't be your friend. Okay. So pretty soon I had very few charms. And my kindergarten teacher noticed this.
uh,
And we were all sitting on the carpet. And she called me out and she was like, how would your mom feel if she knew you were giving away all your charms? And like she was angry at me. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think she'd care. And then she told everybody to give me my charms back. And it was such a moment of being bullied in two different directions.
uh,
Um, I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm getting in trouble for doing what I thought was the right thing.
yeah,
Um, and I think there's been moments in my life where I've gotten in trouble for doing the right thing, what I perceive to be the right thing. And it's the thing that infuriates me the most.
yeah.
So,
The good trouble. Yeah,
yeah.
getting into trouble for doing the right thing. It turns out in this world, there's a lot of opportunity to get into good trouble. Yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
But it sucks when you think you're doing the people pleasing thing and then you find out you're pissing off a lot of other people that you hadn't accounted for. So I don't know. I've had a lot of stories like that where I've been like, what do you all want from me? Okay, so that's my identity shaping story.
Oh
My
yeah.
funny story is I think I've always been a performer and a ham, and I was a finalist in the state speech contest when I was a junior.
Huh.
And they called all the contestants up to the stage, and I ran up excitedly, and then I took a big jump and landed in the spot I was supposed to be in, and my shoes slipped right out from under me, and I landed on my butt in front
Oh
of the whole
no.
group.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
And I just, it happens. I just hopped up and I was like,
Threw your
but
hands in the
yeah,
air. You...
I didn't do that, but yeah, it was basically like, I don't care. Yeah, I think that's kind of emblematic of who I am. It's like,
Huh.
I'm going to mess up and I'm not going to spend time being embarrassed about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to own it and move on.
That's probably what makes you one of my favorite people to talk to.
Oh,
Like, I do not understand, like, when we have, social stumbles or whatever, like, why sit and dwell on that? Like, let's own it, let's laugh about it, let's move on, like every one of us. So, that's an incredible story. I'm taken back to like Amelia Bedelia, like just just so much like social awkwardness, and yet that's the beauty of the story. I love
right.
it. I love it. So when you these days, when you think about God, what kind of images come to mind?
Well, honestly, I think my go-to image is still the fat man in the sky.
Uh,
That's not what I believe. I think that's what comes to mind. And I would say that my fear is that God is disengaged. And I don't believe that, but that's the fear that I operate out of
sure.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
when I think of God now, I think of God telling a story through me and through everyone. I think of it like I'm discovering the story as we go.
Yeah.
And I think that something that I hang on to is something that I read a long time ago. You can't possibly have an idea of God that is better than what the truth is.
Mm,
And that has helped me a lot as I've wrestled with all sorts of theological questions about like predestination and the existence of hell and all sorts of stuff that's kept me up at night.
yeah.
And what I come back to is I find that idea very comforting that, I don't have to understand everything, but it makes sense to me that there's nothing I could think about God that's better than what's true.
Yeah. How very Methodist of you, Betsy. That's how you ended up back in the Methodist church, right? Because the fundamentalist church that you were baptized in their tub, like they would have been like, this is not an unfolding story. Here's the answers, right? And here's the truths that you have to believe whether you find them beautiful or not. And what you're saying is like there's this unfolding story that God participates in, and that the truth of that is really greater than I can imagine, because I'm never going to imagine anything more beautiful than the truth about who God is.
Yeah, I don't think they would have responded that way to me. They might have thought it, but yeah, I can be pretty charming. I don't think they'd be like, oh, that's wrong.
We don't know what she just said, but all right.
Yeah.
She talked about Jesus and got baptized in our toe. So, Betsy, just one last question. You and your husband and your family are here while your husband Jeff works on his PhD at the University of Memphis. What made you all decide to stay at Memphis First? Because there's a whole city worth of churches that you could worship at.
So we came here and we came from a church in Lincoln that was non-denominational. It had evangelical free roots. I think it was a church plant of the Evangelical Free Church, but it became full of people who had been hurt by Christianity and wanted to pursue Jesus, but had a lot of baggage to work through
Yeah.
and a lot that they didn't want. They didn't want to take a lot of baggage they wanted to get rid of and still follow and love Jesus. So it was right where my husband and I were at, basically. It was a perfect fit. And so at the time that we left, the church had been through, some different things. And at the time that we left, they were an affirming LGBTQIA plus affirming congregation with evangelical free roots, which is odd. It's odd that you find a church where people believe in like talking about Jesus and the gospel and sharing their faith, but also believe our queer friends should be included in that and
Yeah.
not held back until they get their lives together or whatever.
Right.
Right. So we moved to Memphis and we're like, okay, let's find a queer affirming evangelical church.
Oh, good
And
luck.
that was a hilarious idea. So we did try out a couple of churches that I think the problem was if they were affirming, they were too boring. And if they weren't affirming, then that was just kind of a deal breaker. And
Yeah.
because I've always thought of the Methodist Church as being boring,
Yeah.
it was weird that we ended up here. We ended up here because Jeff met you and liked you and thought, well, let's just go check it out and support him for a week. And then we just really loved the preaching. It was weird. And it's very, very weird to me that I'm raising my kids in a Methodist church right now because I'm just looking at them and wondering, are they having the same thoughts I had when I was a kid? Like, are they getting it more than I did? Is this more real to them than it was to me as a child? And I think so, and I really hope so. But there's definitely tension. I'm always asking that question. I love, love, love being part of Memphis First. I love you. I love all the people I've gotten to know, but I do hold some tension in terms of, okay, like, how can I help my kids have a relationship with Jesus without all the baggage of hell and fear and hating the sinner and loving the sin? No,
Yeah.
hating this.
Yeah.
Well, really hating the sinner and hating the sin is what it is.
Yeah. That's right. That's exactly what it is. I think that that is one of my unofficial goals is to help people see I can love Jesus and be in a relationship with Jesus in a church community that comes with baggage because all humans have baggage, but not that kind of baggage. We don't have to hate people to follow Jesus. In fact, it's kind of a prerequisite that we deal with our hatred for people, you know. And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful that we get to be a tension-filled space that you all felt like you could raise your kids in for a few years. And you have
Thanks.
fantastic kids. I got to pray with them on Sunday for the blessing of the backpacks, and it was such a cool experience for me.
Thanks. I just thought of this story. It's kind of illustrative. I was in college, and as part of the Baptist ministry, I had had conversations with people trying to convince me that it was wrong to be gay. And I was having a hard time buying it. I looked at the passages and I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense. I don't feel good about this. It doesn't. At the time, I was like, well, your heart is evil in all ways and going to lead you astray. But over time, I started to think, like, I think this is the Holy Spirit, that I'm not okay with this rhetoric. But during that time, I had a friend named Josh. He was a year younger than me. His sophomore year, he went to do the Disney training program where you spend a semester in Florida working for Disney World. And during that time, he came out
Mm.
and he came back to visit. And he wasn't going to have a lot of time to hang out. So basically, the only time I could spend with him is when he and his friend Ryan were going to walk from our dorm to a coffee house. And so I thought, well, we're not going to get into anything significant. It'll just be a time to say, hey, how are you? Remember me? It's good to see you. But when we got to the coffee house and there were these kids on the street and they were from a Christian school and they were doing on the street interviews with people. And so they asked if they could ask us questions and we said, okay. And so I'm sitting here with Josh that I know pretty well, but we haven't talked about the fact that he's come out. His friend Ryan has been out for a while, as far as I know. And the kids start hitting us with these questions. What do you think about the death penalty? What do you think about abortion? What do you think about homosexuality?
Wow.
What do you think about Jesus? They asked the Jesus question first, and I was surprised because Josh and Ryan really had similar answers to what I would say about Jesus.
Hmm.
And then they asked, what do you think about homosexuality? And both of them said, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And then they looked at me and I was like a deer in the headlights. And I'm like, how am I going to answer this question? I don't want to answer this question accurately in front of my friends. Like this
This is the
is,
question that evangelicals always told me I was going to go to hell if I answered the wrong way. Yeah.
yeah. And this is the absolute last question in the whole wide world that I want to be asked right now in front of these guys. So they asked the boys that question. And then they turned to me and they said, and what do you think about abortion? And I was,
They changed the subject on you. Yeah.
I was like, I would love to tell you everything I think about abortion. Just don't bring up the queer thing again.
That I think is a really good illustrator, I think, of how a lot of churches don't think about the implications of their theology, which is to say, like, if we're standing before vulnerable people and we feel internal tension, whether we can answer about our theology honestly, then
Mm,
that might be an indicator that something's not quite right. Because
exactly.
that takes more reflection from churches than often I think churches are prepared to do. But
Mm.
Betsy, it was so fantastic to talk to you. I am so grateful for you just giving me like 20 minutes, 25 minutes of your time. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tom. It's been an honor.
It's been a pleasure, honor.